Welcome to the Awakened Parent Project, conscious conversations, empowered parenting with me, Susan Dolci. It's time to open our hearts and our minds to what it means to be a parent, exploring and expanding the ways we communicate, validate, and show up daily for our kids. With a parent-centric focus, you learn to become more present, a better active listener, more reflective, more engaged, and mutually empowered. Parenting isn't about perfection. It's about presence, honesty, self-compassion, unconditional love, and conscious communication. The Awakened Parent Project starts now. Hey everybody, welcome to the Awakened Parent Project. I'm your host, I'm Susan Dolci. I'm a certified parent coach with the Jai Institute for Parenting, and it's my hope that you will find this a safe space to journey on a path of both practical and spiritual exploration. From the time my first daughter was born in 1994, that's a long time ago, I've been driven by a vision where children are nurtured both physically and spiritually by adults who are present, grounded, and empowered. I believe that conscious communication, self-exploration, and self-forgiveness are the tools that enable parents to foster deep, lasting connections with their children. Parenting isn't about perfection. We say this all the time on the show, but I believe it's about presence, it's about honesty, self-compassion, unconditional love, and conscious communication. And my guest today is an expert on conscious communication, especially when we're dealing with some of our biggest parenting challenges. Julie King is the author, along with Joanna Faber, of the new book, How to Talk When Kids Won't Listen: Whining, Fighting, Meltdowns, Defiance, and Other Challenges of Childhood. They also co-authored the bestseller, How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen, which has now been translated into 22 languages worldwide. Julie and Joanna created the companion app, How to Talk, Parenting Tips in Your Pocket, as well as the app Parenting Pro. And I hope we get to talk about that because it's a really cool app. Oh. Yeah. Julie's been educating and supporting parents since 1995. In addition to consulting with individual parents and couples, she speaks and leads workshops online and in person for schools, nonprofits, businesses, and parent groups across the US and internationally. Julie received her BA from Princeton University, and she has a JD from Yale Law School, and I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Oh, thanks so much. It's nice to be here.
So, as I mentioned in your bio, you co-authored a book, So Little Kids Will Listen, How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. And if none of you are familiar with these books, there's a history with this whole series, because it even goes back to Joanna's mother, right? Starting the series. And so that was back in the 80s, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So her mother co-authored a book called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, together with Elaine Mazlish. And that book has been termed the Parenting Bible. It's still a bestseller 40 years later. Mm-hmm. That actually wasn't their first book. They wrote a book. I don't know if you know this one. It's called Liberated Parents, Liberated Children, Your Guide to a Happier Family. That one's written more like a story or a novel. It tracks a mom who has a couple kids and goes through a parenting workshop and tries to change how she talks with her kids. And it talks about the ups and downs, the challenges and successes. And it's not as well known, but everybody I recommend it to who reads it says they love that book too. So if you haven't read that one, I recommend it as well.
It's a very interesting perspective to write it from like in a novel sort of story. I've read another book like that by another coach where she talked about, it was like a student teacher sort of scenario. And it was very interesting to read. So I wrote that down. I'm going to be reading that one.
Yeah. Take a look.
But so how is this book? Because this book is really structured very coolly. That's a word. I just made a word up. Because you have like, the first part of it is like all of your tools, all the great communication tools that you teach parents. And then the second part of it is like anecdotes and stories and from people that you've worked with and people who have written in. So can we talk a little about that?
Sure. So as you say, our first book, How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen, came out several years ago. And the feedback we got was really great. And people sent us stories, and they also sent us questions. And I was doing workshops where people would say, I love this. And what do you do in this particular situation? So we started collecting these questions and these stories. And we decided we would put it into a second book. We had the challenge of appealing to readers who haven't read our first book and readers who have. And one of the things that people said to us is they wanted ways to practice the tools that we had introduced. So we reintroduced the tools in a new way. We have this great new illustrator. I hope you liked the illustrations, Emily Wimberly. She's fantastic. And she really captures the feel of the scenes. So there's a lot of cartoons for people who like to read cartoons. And we've heard from a number of readers that their spouses aren't so into reading, but they like the cartoons.
Oh, that's a really good idea. I didn't,
right?
I was thinking like, even if you're having a trouble with, let's just say a middle school child or something, like the cartoons would also help start the communication with your child.
Absolutely. And these are not secrets. These are not, you're welcome to share them with your kids. We have the cartoons, we have practice exercises just to make it a little bit more fun. And we have the very popular reminder pages as well, because people like to see on one or two pages, okay, what was in this book chapter, and just one example. So that's the first part of the book. But as you say, the second part is all of what I think of as hot topics that people have been asking us since the first book came out. And of course, we're addressing a wider age range because everybody's kids have been getting older. And some of these, so we have so many topics, as you've seen. We have a lot of questions on screen time. Of course,
I want to talk about that. We're definitely going to talk about that, because that is, everybody that I work with is like, we need to talk about screen time. So
it's been a huge challenge, especially the last year and a half.
Right.
But even things like name calling, whining, and then some specialty topics that I think of them as specialty, divorce. We have a chapter on sex. We have a few chapters on troubleshooting if you've been trying this and it's not working. So hopefully we've hit on the questions that most of our readers will have. And like you said, it's one thing to understand the theory. It's another thing to figure out how to put it into practice. And a lot of people say what really helps is to hear, what exactly did people say? What exactly do you say when your kid says, I'm not doing that, right?
Yeah.
Like, what words do you use? So that's why we have many more stories and examples in the book.
Well, that's when I'm coaching parents, when I'm working with parents. I mean, part of I think the hardest part especially when you're in the heat of the moment, is to just get present with yourself, like, get into your body before you start spewing out things that you don't mean to say. And I know a lot of people just struggle with doing that. Like, what does that mean? Like, how do I get present? But one of the things I wanted to ask you in reading the book is that I think a lot of parents have expectations on their children that aren't necessarily developmentally aligned. Just like we are like, he should know how to do this by now, or how come we've been talking about this forever and they're still not doing it?
Yeah. We have a reminder in the book that for children who are learning something new, they might be able to do it in the morning, but when they're fresh, but maybe not in the afternoon when they're not so fresh. They might be able to do it at some point and not others. Development is not a linear. It's not a constant linear getting better and better. Like we have our own ups and downs also, right? As we're trying to learn, for parents who are learning a new style of speaking, sometimes we remember and sometimes we just snap, right? And kids do that too. So the more that we can have empathy and understanding for that, the more realistic our expectations will be. And that's part of why we get so frustrated with our kids, is that our expectations don't match reality, is what you're saying, right?
Right.
We think, well, he should be able to do this. Where does that should come from? Is it because somebody else's kid can do it? Their kid's different from mine. Is it because he did it yesterday, so he should be able to do it today? Well, yesterday he was feeling pretty good. Today he had a bad night's sleep. He got into a fight with his friend. All kinds of reasons why sometimes kids can do things that they can't at other times.
Yeah. And you start out the book with, and this is really, really important to me, is like addressing feelings, talking about feelings.
Yeah.
And adults can't even do that.
Yeah, we can
Adults have a
feel
hard
them.
time. Yeah, adults have a hard time. Just, we've been taught to stuff down certain emotions, based on how we were parented.
Sure.
Certain emotions were good and certain emotions were bad. And we carry that over into our parenting. And, we might be, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think if we weren't taught to be able to show that emotion, then we're uncomfortable dealing with that emotion in our kids. And what is so brilliant about this book is that it really, everybody's feelings matter. Everybody's needs matter. And this is how do we come together and collaborate and communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with a lot of people who say, I wasn't allowed to be angry, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not allowed to be angry, then we don't know how to handle when our children are angry. We don't even notice that we're angry. And so I work with a lot of parents who they get to a point where they just snap. And that's when we tend to say the things that are the most sort of hurtful, right? Or we raise our voice, or we say something, some sort of a dig, or what's wrong with you, and how, that sort of thing. And I think, as you say, we have to have compassion for ourselves. And it takes a certain amount of presence to even notice how we're feeling. And one of the things we talk about in the book is that we need to share how we are feeling with our kids. And sometimes I think we're afraid to do that. But kids need to know that parents have feelings too. Now, not to go overboard. They're not responsible for our feelings, but we have them. And that's sometimes a revelation for people that I remember. I remember my mother saying to me when we were little, I am furious. I'm thinking, oh no, that was upsetting and scary, but it really made an impression on me because she was I had a pretty calm mother. And so it mattered to me. And I remember saying that to my kids, and they really paid attention. But you can overdo it. You can overdo it, right? And say, that made me furious. And the kids will say, well, Mom, deal with it yourself. Like, we're not doing that. So sure. It can be hard to notice how we're feeling when we're in the moment with the kids and we're juggling so much. I remember wondering, like, why did I get to that point of snapping? Did I not notice? I thought I was doing okay. I thought I was feeling kind of, together. And then all of a sudden I would lose it with my kids. And I'd have to say, check in with yourself. Like, what's going on? Do I need a break? Can I take a break? Can I go to the bathroom? Yeah.
It's the HALT, right? Hungry, angry, no, hungry. I forget the acronym, but it's something. Love. I know the last one's tired. Anyway, yeah, we do have to check in with ourselves. Like, what's going on? Why did I flip my lid? We are coming up on a break. When we come back, I want to talk about what you see as one of the biggest communication issues, like where people struggle the most in communicating. And I'd like to also talk, whether it's toddlers, middle schoolers, high schoolers. I could use some advice for adults. I have my adult children. You're listening to the Awakened Parent Project. I am here with Julie King, author of How to Talk When Kids Won't Listen, and we'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to the Awakened Parent Project. I'm Susan Dolci, and today I'm talking with Julie King, who co-authored the book, How to Talk When Kids Won't Listen, with Joanna Faber. And we're talking about communication, like how to talk to your kids especially when they won't listen, or you're just having it's a difficult conversation. Like at JAI, we talk about having empowered conversations with our children. And that's really basically what you're teaching people to do here, is to address what's going on in the moment, addressing the feelings, the emotions, the needs. Like all communication, all behavior is communication of an unmet need, right? So what I would like to know, in all of your expertise, what are like some of the top communication issues that you see parents struggling with?
Well, we started talking about feelings, and that's where I'm going to go.
Okay.
If there's one thing that's the biggest challenge, I think, for parents, it's to pay attention and to listen to their kids in a way that they are noticing how a child actually feels. So a lot of parents will say to me, I can't, how do I talk so the kids will listen? That's why we use that language in our title. And what do they really mean? They mean, how do I get my kids to behave, right? How do I get them to do what I say?
Obey.
Right? Obey. Yes. And, people will laugh because it's like, yeah, that is in fact what we want them to do, at least some of the time, because they have to put their shoes on. We have to get to work, all of this.
Yeah.
And so, the first big idea we talk about in the book is that there's a connection between how kids feel and how they behave, right? In fact, as you were saying, there's a connection between how people feel and how people behave.
Mhm.
If you think about those moments when you're not your best self as a parent, maybe you had an argument with your boss, or you didn't get enough sleep last night and you snap at your kids. But right, those tend to be those times when we're not feeling our best. And so we are not being our best selves. And at other times, faced with the same issue or the same conflict, we would handle it with much more grace. So that's true for us as adults. So it's at least as true for kids. There's a connection between how kids feel and how kids behave. So that leads us to ask, so how do we help them feel better so that they'll behave better, right? And one thing we can do is to accept their feelings, which sounds very simple when I say it. It can be so challenging to do in practice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially when kids are having what I would refer to as negative feelings, right? I don't want to go to school. This homework is too hard. I don't want to put my shoes on. Especially when we have an agenda. We think, what do you mean you don't want to you don't like school? I couldn't get you to leave yesterday. I kept yelling at you to get in the car, right? Or, what do you mean the homework is too hard? Honey, it's easy. Later, let me show you, right? But no child was ever encouraged to do homework because what's hard for him is easy for other people, right? Or we want to give them the lecture. If you would spend half as much time working as you spend complaining about the homework, the whole thing would be done already. Again, very unlikely that a child will turn around and say, that's true. Good point. I'm going to get right down to it.
Right.
Because it doesn't engender those feelings of cooperation, those feelings of motivation. So why do we say these things as parents? Well, as you say, they go through our heads. We think, oh my God, if he would just sit down and do it, then we wouldn't have to deal with this. And we let those words out of our mouths. So the one big challenge is to not let them out.
Yeah, exactly. Zip it.
Zip it, right? I always say, if you need to have a partner or a friend or someone you can say these things to when the kids aren't around. My writing partner, Joanna, she was somebody I would call when I was having school issues and I wanted to vent with somebody, right?
Yeah.
Better her than my kids. She was very good at that. But so what can we say, right? Okay, so I said those aren't helpful things. It can feel counterintuitive to acknowledge what something feels like to our kids. You're not in the mood to go to school right now. You wish you could just stay home and finish playing with that Lego set. Or that homework does look overwhelming. There's so many problem sets and all those steps for the long division. It could drive you crazy, right? I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with my kids when they were younger. I bet you wish that they would just outlaw homework.
Yeah.
If you were going to design a school, there would be no homework. And my kids would, my daughter especially, she loved to have fantasies. She was going to design a school. It was going to start at, I think it started at 10:30 or 11. They'd have, an hour of class. Then there would be lunch. Then there would be, I don't know, art or something. There would be recess. And then they'd go home, right? And there would be no homework. And we would have that discussion. And then she would, sit down because she knew she had to do it eventually. If you think about it for yourself, if you came home and you said to your spouse or your partner, oh my God, my boss just lay on this huge report he wants me to do. I've been working all day. I'm exhausted. Like I never get a break. It's like endless. And this is going to take me hours. And if your partner said to you, well, you just have to do it. You need that job. How would you feel towards your spouse?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
All that irritation and upset about the report, right? Right towards your spouse. But that's what happens with our kids also. When we say these things, it just doesn't help. So it makes them less inclined to do what they need to do, less inclined to cooperate with us. So we're working against ourselves when we do this. So if I had to name one big issue, that would be it.
I've heard people say too, like if you wouldn't say it to, like you say, your spouse or your partner or company at your house,
Yeah.
why would you, if you wouldn't say it to another adult friend, why do you think it's going to work with your children? Like, just because they are smaller and younger doesn't make them powerless. And we kind of like don't take any of their feelings into account. We just want them to do what we tell them to do when we tell them to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, even with my adult daughters, like validating their feelings changes everything. We even kind of have now we've developed sort of not a code, but a system where they'll tell me, I just want to vent. Like they'll text me, I just want to vent. And so it's like, bleh, it's like verbal vomit from, and it's just because they want to get it off their chest. And I'm not here to fix it. I'm just here to give them the bucket to,
Right.
to put it into, and not to take anything personally. And then, but then they feel like they've been seen and heard. And I think that's what, as parents, in this traditional, power over sort of authoritative parenting models, they just don't feel seen or heard.
Yeah. And we're modeling for our kids. So if all we do is tell them it's not a big deal and don't do that, and they'll use that with us, and they'll use that with their siblings and with their peers. I was just talking to a parent, one of my clients, who said that her daughter has been ordering her around. She drops her lovey and she says, pick that up. And she, she looks at her mother like, you have to do that. And the mother's like, I'm in the middle of doing something. I don't have to go pick up your levy. Well, it turns out that the mom has been saying to her, put your coat on, get your lunchbox. Like that's what she's been doing with her daughter. So her daughter's starting to do it back to her.
Absolutely.
Doesn't sound so nice when it's coming out of your kid's mouth, right? But that said, it's a challenge to figure out how to get kids to do the things we need them to do without telling them directly, put that down, get your coat on. It seems like the most efficient way to get kids to do things. But the problem is when people are ordered around, it creates resentment. We're creating this resistance, and it just makes life that much harder. So maybe we should chat about, other ways to get kids to do things.
Yeah, because we're also coming up on another break, and I definitely want to chat about that, because one of the things we talk about, it's actually a whole unit in the program that I do, and that's on playful parenting. And how to use the power of play, especially when you're in those moments where you want to get kids to do something and like getting out the door on time, and they're in their own world trying to do whatever they want to do, and how the power of play can really change up the energy of a situation.
Yes.
And frustration and stuff like that. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll have more with Julie King, and we need to get your info out there when we come back. Don't let me forget. We need to tell people where they can find you besides the book. You're listening to the Awakened Parent Project, and we'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to the Awakened Parent Project. I'm Susan Dolci, and today I'm talking to the author of How to Talk When Kids Won't Listen. Her name is Julie King. We've been having a great conversation here about conscious communication and all the challenges that we face in raising kids. And before we get any farther, where can people find you? How can people connect with you?
We have a website, howtotalk.com. There's dashes between the words, how-to-talk.com. So that's our website. And we're also on Facebook, Faber and King. And we are on Instagram, howtotalk.forparents. And where else are we? We're on Twitter, howtotalker. I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah. And I have my own on my website, which is julieking.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the book. You can get the book on your website, on Amazon.
Yes, the book
is
also
available. Audio. You have an audio book too.
Yes, thank you. And the book is available wherever books are sold. Yes, all of those places that you go for books. And the audio, this was our first experience recording the audio ourselves, and that was a new experience too. I never knew it could be so exhausting, but it was. It's all out there now.
Was it fun? Would you say it was fun like you said, it was challenging?
It was fun, part of it, and part of it was challenging, and part of it was literally, I never talked for hours and hours and hours straight like that. So that was something new for me. So I haven't actually listened to it yet because it's just out. I'm a little afraid because you know how your own voice, you always think,
Yeah.
oh, I listened to part of Joanna's. I thought she sounds great. So you can listen to her.
It's funny. I was listening to, I was watching, because it's on YouTube, part of the clips of you guys doing,
Yeah.
and for people who are Transformation Talk Radio people, and I was listening to it, and if Linda's listening right now, Joanna sounds just like Linda Firing, who's one of these Dr. Pat's executive producer. I'm like, is that Linda? No, it's not Linda. That's Joanna. Anyway,
Yep.
I want to talk about the app real quick. I definitely want to talk about the pitfalls of praise, because this to me is like, this is my children's generation. But before we do that, I want to talk about the app, because it's such a great compliment, not just to the little kids book, but to this book. And if you're not familiar with it, it's how to talk when little kids. Go ahead.
It's called How to Talk, Parenting Tips in Your Pocket.
Yes. And so, and I have in my JAI classes, we have broken down in a small group. So there's 4 of us, and I'd gotten the book to read, and the information. I was like, there's an app. So we're on our Zoom meeting. I'm like, guys, there's an app, and I download it, and then everybody else is downloading it, and we're going through the kids are fighting.
Oh yeah.
Like, so it's like, here's the scenario. And this is what's great about this app. You put in, like, the app will give you like several scenarios. So let's just say the kids are fighting. And then it's like, are they physically harming each other? Yeah. Or are they just screaming? Okay, if they're physically harming each other, separate them. And then it like walks you through what to do. Yeah. And I think sometimes when you are in the heat of a situation, especially for me, if you're in a car, I wish I had this when my kids were little, to just have something, because instead of spewing something that I'm going to regret or that's going to scare my kids, you've got this app that will at least get you started in the right direction.
Yep. That's really great feedback. That's exactly what we were hoping for. Yes. When I first came up with the idea, I was telling you in the break, I had this idea that we could ask just a few questions and send people to the right tools. And I said to Joanna, we have to make an app. And her first response was, no, Julie, we can't make an app. We can't, this won't work. So my middle son, who's a computer coder, among other things, he made an app maker for me, because I had envisioned a sort of decision tree where we ask you a question, and depending on how you answer it, we send you to the right part of the app. And it turned out to be incredibly complicated to make all of this. So he made an app maker, and I started it just to give her a sense of it. And then I showed it to her. This is in the before days when we could get together, because she's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. So we live far apart. So I was visiting her, and I showed it to her, and she's like, oh, this could work. And of course I was thinking, yeah, well, just take us, a few weeks and we'll make it. Oh my gosh, it was a big project, but I'm so thrilled that you found it and that you've been using it. And thank you for telling people about it, because it's exactly why we made it. You can be in the moment, and you can't even pull up the book. You're just thinking, I just need something to help me ground me and give me something concrete I can do or say, so I don't make things worse. Right.
And that's the thing. I mean, we get so triggered just by, the situations. Like, I remember when I was growing up, my mom, I had 2 older brothers. And if they got physical with each other, it just sent her over the edge. Like, that was just a huge trigger for her. And now I can go back and go, I'm curious why, what happened in her childhood that made the physical altercation such a triggering thing. Because my husband said the same thing of him and his brothers. They would always like start to roughhouse and fight. And then his mom would get, like, you can't fight. You can't. And he's like, if she just let us fight sometimes and just get it out of our systems, because we would just like bash each other. And then we'd be like, yeah, okay, it's fine. We're, it's like, that's what boys do. I'm like, okay, I don't know. Like, luckily I didn't raise sons, because I don't know if I would. I think I might have inherited my mom's trigger. Anyway,
but we also all have that sort of mama bear, like, don't hurt my child, right? If any other person came and did anything to hurt your child, you'd be there in a moment, like, defend, protect. And I think when one child is hurting another, that just brings up all those feelings. I must protect them. I cannot let one child hurt another. So I think it's pretty common that parents, do not want their kids hurting each other.
Yeah. And one of the things we also talk about is in those instances, and this is an aside, but in those instances, our reaction, as you said, is usually to go and comfort the kid who's being hurt, who's been like pummeled by his brother or whatever,
right. Yeah.
when really maybe we should be addressing the aggressor because there's something going on there that needs our attention.
Both.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I'm thinking back to a conversation I had with my older one. So he had a lot of resentment towards his younger brother for quite a while. There was a lot of conflict, and he knew just how to push his younger brother's buttons and get him mad. And I forget exactly what the conflict was one day, but it was just cruel. And I separated them, and then I had to go calm myself down. I always went to my closet when I had no place else to go, because I share a closet with my husband, so there's a lot of clothes in there, and I could say things and the kids wouldn't hear me. And that's where I would go to vent if I couldn't get away. Yeah. And I went in there and I was like, I just want to give him away. It's like, how could I raise up, this kid? How could this be? And he's just so awful. And I just, I said things I can't say on the air. And, I finally calmed myself down and said to myself, I work with parents all the time. Like, what would you say to a parent you were working with if they told this to you? And I thought, well, I have to acknowledge his, my older ones, his feelings. At first I was like, I don't care what his feelings are. He was nasty and mean. And I knew that meant I had to stay in the closet for a few more minutes. I finally got to the point where I actually was genuinely curious to know, like, why is he doing this? Yeah. Right. That's the challenge, is to get ourselves from the place of like, I don't care, like he's awful, to I actually do want to know. And I actually don't exactly know what's going on. And I'm in a place of curiosity rather than of judgment. So once I got myself to that point, I actually went to his room and I said, Asher, you must have been so angry with your brother to say those things. I wonder, you can be such a kind friend. I wonder what was going on. And that's all it took. I got this, you were talking about the venting, the tsunami. I was there with the bucket, so to speak. All these things that his brother had done over the years, and we were going to the baseball game and he said he was too tired, and we missed batting practice, and when we're cleaning up he doesn't help with the cleanup, and like on and on and on, all these resentments. And I listened and I thought, oh, no wonder you're so annoyed with him. Like all of these things have built up, and he's never had a chance to say all of this to me, never mind to his brother. So at the end of this long litany of complaints, I said, that's a lot of issues. No wonder you're so mad at your brother.
Right.
I think he needs to know some of this, but I think it's too long a list for the whole thing. Like, could you pick one thing? And he did. And we talked about how he could talk to his brother about his brother not helping with the cleanup. And we went downstairs and did a problem solving with his brother. He said, I resent it when it's time for us to clean up and you say you're too tired and you don't help, and it's not fair. And his brother said, but I'm really too tired. And which is what his complaint always was. He was too tired. And I really can't help. And I won't tell you, I won't draw it out because it was a long story, but the conclusion we came to was, I said, what could we do so it would feel more fair to Asher, and it won't make you feel like you have to do something that you don't feel like you have the energy to do. And they came up with a plan that there would be a list of things. My younger one, his name is Rashi, a list of things he could do when he did have energy, so that he could redeem himself in his brother's eyes. And one of the things was to take out the recycling. It was a list of things he could do. And I'll tell you, pretty soon after, he took out the recycling and ran to tell his brother, like, I took it out, I did it. So yes. Boy, that was a long story to answer your question.
No, and for everybody who wants more details, that's in the book. It's a good story. Yeah. But that's one of the things that is like a game changer, and that's problem solving.
Yeah.
And that's because we're acknowledging, like you said, you asked your son, what's going on, and then you gave him permission to like say all the stuff maybe he felt he couldn't say. And it's in collaboration on how we're going to fix this. And parents listening out there, sometimes you don't get it right the first time. Like you might come up with a solution and it might work a few days or whatever, a few times, and then it falls apart. So then you collaborate again. But it's all because then they're feeling, as I said, seen and heard, that, and they're going to be more likely to cooperate because they're part of the solution.
Yep. And you're teaching them a really important life skill.
Yeah.
How do we resolve conflicts when we have conflicts with other people? That's a skill they will take into adulthood.
Absolutely.
And at some point they will do it without your guidance. And then you are free to go and have your cup of coffee or read the newspaper or whatever, right? You can look forward to that in the future. I can't emphasize enough how important that life skill is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And again, it can take some time, as you were saying, and it's like a family meeting sort of time to sit down and do it. I've coached one of my clients through that whole thing, and I've seen it be very successful. So yes, problem solving. People, buy this book. It is a great book. We're gonna take one more break. You're listening to the Awaken Parent Project. I'm talking with Julie Faber. We're talking about
Julie
how
King.
to talk. I'm sorry. I just made you one big person.
We're
Julie
almost
King.
one person.
How to talk when kids won't listen. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I am talking with Julie King, not the morphed Julie Faber. Just made them one person before the break. We were talking a few segments back, and we wanted to circle back around to that. And that was adding play into parenting, and not just parenting, not just playing with your children, but the power of play when you are in a challenging situation. And so, as Julie was saying, we were talking about Larry Cohen's book, The Playful Parent, and I had to read it for my JAI classes. And that my gut instinct when I saw that was like, oh, well, granted, I'm beyond the playing years, but I was like, this is going to, as you were saying, I'm going to feel so guilty because I didn't do any of the things that are going to be in this book. And the fact is, I did do a lot of the things that were in the book. I just didn't, I did it in my own way. Like I was very creative, artsy fartsy, like playing with my kids that way, not necessarily the roughhousing and things like that. But I would like your take on how to bring play into solutions.
Oh, yes. Well, I just want to say that I also, when I first, many years ago, saw the title of his book, I thought, oh, another book to make me feel guilty that I don't spend enough time playing with my kids. And the book is about so much more than that. And what we talk about in our book is how you can use play to engage your kids' cooperation. So, for example, you're trying to get your little one, let's say you have a 3 or a 4-year-old, and you're trying to get them to put their shoes on, and they're running around and saying, no, right? And they just think it's one big game, and you're like, I got to get out of here. We have a deadline, right? One of my favorite categories for being playful is to make an inanimate object talk. So you pick up that shoe and you make the shoe talk. I feel so empty. I need a foot in me. Very few little kids can resist a talking shoe. Now your 3-year-old is talking to the shoe. Oh, here, I'll warm you up. And, oh, look, oh, that makes me feel so much better. Thank you for putting your toes in there. Oh, you got your heel in there too. So you can make anything talk. And it is amazing. I can't tell you how many stories I've had over the years of parents who are trying to get their kids to maybe clean up the toys. And if we tell them, don't pick something, no, you can't take something new out until you put away what you already have out, on the floor. How many times have we said that to a kid? And how many times do they say, oh, cool, I forgot about that rule, no problem, right? Like 0 times.
Right.
But you pick up the block bag and you make it talk. I'm hungry, feed me blocks. The green one. No, not the yellow one. That's disgusting. Suddenly they want to know, like, what's she going to say when I throw the next one in? So you, like I said, anything can talk. You're trying to get your kids to brush their teeth. Did you know that toothbrushes can be, I'm just hanging around so lonely. I need somebody's mouth. Did you hear that, Jennifer? Like your toothbrush is calling you. Let's go see what's happening up there. Suddenly it becomes play. And that's the language that kids speak the best, right? Is play. So what I learned was I don't have to get on the floor and always play with my kids to use play. I can use whatever it is that I need to do with them, and I can do it playfully. So I remember trying to get my two little ones into the car. Who doesn't have a challenge like trying to get two small children into a car? I said, let's pretend we're a train. Who wants to be the engine? Who wants to be the caboose? And literally, chugga, 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 choo, choo. Like, that's how we got into the car. In fact, I needed to get them to school. It wasn't just that was why we're getting in the car. When we got into school, we still were a train. Chugga, 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 chugging into school. You have to have a little bit, give up that self-consciousness and just know that this is for the greater good, that nobody's going to be screaming or crying in the way into school. And I just eliminated the transition that way, because one of the many challenges of raising kids is transitions, like getting kids to stop doing one thing and do another. That's a big challenge. So if
that's what I was going to bring up. I was going to bring that up too about screen time. I think that's the biggest problem with screen time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's like in the book you say, if somebody were to tell you, like, you're having a good time, but like, I think you use the example of reading a good book. Here's a great book, honey, read this book. Oh, you get to the cliffhanger or whatever, and there's like, oh, I want that book back. Transitioning, stopping in the middle. Yeah, who wants to be told time's up? So I think that is really critical to keeping some goodwill with still keeping boundaries around screens.
Yeah. We talk a lot about on screens. Think about how to help kids transition from the screen to something else, right? So it can help if we find an appropriate stopping point or end point, rather than using time. As a lot of people say, well, I give them 10 minutes. Well, how long does the game last? 15, right? So there you are, 2/3 of the way through. So rather than doing that, let's see can we find a game that's shorter? Can we give them the 15 minutes? Can we say you play till the next level comes up, or till the video is over, or the story has ended? And then it's also, especially now I'm talking about little kids, it can really be helpful to tell them what's coming next, rather than telling them just stop this. Because when you stop using those screens, the screens are so stimulating. They've got color and story and lights, and it's so exciting. When you turn them off, the world looks boring. It's just plain, right? So sometimes we have to do a little marketing. When they're real little, sometimes we can suggest something to them. Hey, let's see if we get out the bubbles and see if we can pop them with our noses. Or our toes, or something. For older kids, we might ask them before they get on the screen, what are you going to do after the screens? Give them some put them in charge of figuring out what they're going to do next. That's one of the tools we talk about, is to put the child in charge, because it's easier to end the screen activity when we know what's coming next and it's something to look forward to. It just makes it easier to move on.
I also think one of the things we've talked about in my training is that, especially for older kids, for some of the more physical games, where they're like, the games are more physical, like, not that their bodies are physical, but that it's really good to have them move afterwards, like get them outside, get them on a trampoline, get them to run around, get them to expel that energy that's kind of trapped inside because they've been doing all this like mental energy.
Yeah. One of the things we suggest for parents of older kids is to problem solve with them. We were talking about problem solving before. I did this with my son, the one who is the coder, who created the app maker. He taught himself to code, but he spent a lot of time on screen. So it was very productive. Yeah, self-taught. But I worried about him sitting for hours at a stretch. So it was tempting to go and say, you got to stop this. You got to get up. It's not good for your body. Like, to give him the whole lecture. But I knew that wasn't going to work. Right?
Lectures never work.
They don't work, and it wasn't going to work for him.
Yeah.
So I told him, you're doing this incredible stuff. You're learning all this. I'm just worried because your body's not moving. And it's really important to move your body during the day as well. Well, what did he do? He researched it online, because of course that's what he did. And he found a program called Pomodoros. I write about it in the book, where you work for 20 or 25 minutes and then you take a 5 or 10 minute break. And he set the timer, and he did this himself. much more effective than if I had come in and said, you're going to have to take a break every 25 minutes. This isn't working. He decided, and that's part of why it worked.
Right.
So we did that problem solving with him.
Yes. So we're coming up at the top of the hour. Again, where can people find you? I want to make sure, first of all, like I said, everybody, please go get this book. And part of the reason this book is so special is, and I think you've mentioned this before, but like you can go to the topic that you want addressed. You don't have to read the whole thing cover for cover. I definitely recommend the first 4 or 5 chapters, because that's where all the juicy stuff is. But like Julie said, like if you have questions on screen time, or you can flip through and you can find that in the book, and it's sort of like like a reference book for conversations.
Yes, it's not. We don't intend people to read it straight through. Go to your issues. You have a whiny kid, jump to the whining chapter.
Tantrums,
Absolutely.
meltdowns.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the book is available wherever books are sold, and it's available in all formats: paperback, Kindle, audiobook, hardcover, whatever you want, you can get it. If you want to know more about what I'm doing personally, you can go to my website, julieking.org. We have a Facebook page, which is Faber and King. We're on Instagram. I'm really just ramping up on Instagram, learning how to use it. It's not my medium, but I'm learning how to talk for parents. And we have a new website, how-to-talk.com. So it's how to talk with dashes in between the words, how-to-talk.com. And you can find more about our apps. We have actually 2 apps. We've only talked about one. The other one is sort of a practice app if you want to practice this approach with scenarios. You can see more about the workshops that I'm offering, and we have a blog post. It's all there on how-to-talk.com.
So now we just need you to write one, how to talk when your adult children won't listen.
Send us your stories and we'll write that one next.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. This has been awesome. I was really looking forward to this, and you did not disappoint. You are a wealth of information.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you so much for having me.
So I always want everybody to remember, I like to close the show with this reminder that parenting is not about perfection. You're human. That's not possible. But conscious parenting is about allowing your children to be your awakening. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thank you for being a part of the Awakened Parent Project. My goal with this show is to help us all become more compassionate and engaged parents by diving into the many techniques and ideologies of the conscious parenting community. This is a safe space to embark on a practical and spiritual journey of self-exploration and expand our ideas about conscious parenting. Got thoughts, questions, ideas? I want to hear from you. Reach out to me if there's a topic you'd like to hear covered on the show, or to share your conscious parenting story by visiting susandolci.com.